Welcome to Dark Character Profiler. Take a deep dive into the background and personalities of villains from books, video games, manga, and comics. Psychological analysis of some of the most deviant and heinous characters of all time. Now, here's Fulcrum.
Welcome back, my dark disciples, to another episode of Dark Character Profiler. The shadows have gathered, the spotlight is dim, and we're ready to delve into the depths of another fascinating and perhaps unsettling character. Pull up a chair, settle in, and let's begin. Handsome Jack's presence filled the air with a buzzing static that lingered in the humidity, thick and heavy. The distorted image on the screen was unsettling, but his voice wrapped around me like a silken thread through the crackling comms. He was almost charming, but with a honed razor's edge. His smile was a broad and easy expression, but his eyes were cold like polished steel. He tempted me with opportunities to join his quote-unquote winning team, but his words felt like a shiver down my spine with a thin veneer over something dark and predatory. His chilling gaze made me feel small and insignificant. He radiated power that was palpable, despite just being a face on a screen. Jack spoke of undesirables and riffraff. I felt a prickle of unease, wondering if I was one of them. He offered me a test that didn't feel like an offer, but more like a command, with hidden, polite suggestions and thinly veiled threats. I knew I didn't have a choice, with the map on the screen glowing like a silent directive. It wasn't just fear that was present, but a more profound and unsettling feeling. I felt like a pawn in a game I didn't understand, with a sense of being watched. He was in control, Pandora his playground, and I was just another toy to be played with. The outpost's air felt thick and heavy, leaving a thin layer of sweat on my skin. The bandit camp's location was burned into my mind. I was a vault hunter who searched for adventure and glory, but this felt different. I felt as though I had stepped into something that was far more dangerous than I had ever imagined. Despite being given the task, I felt as if I was being hunted. Somehow, I knew that this was just the beginning. Jack is an early to mid-40s human male who will be analyzed to determine his mental state, predisposition for violence, and identify significant life events leading to, during, and after his reign as CEO of Hyperion. Jack has a long history of manipulation, violence, and a desire for control. He has few healthy relationships, if any, due to his lack of empathy, remorse, and inability to form emotionally meaningful attachments. This lack of empathy and remorse led to a lengthy career of manipulation, violence, and even murder to achieve his own goals. The contributing factors include his father's death at a young age, his mother abandoning him, and being raised by his physically and emotionally abusive grandmother. Handsome Jack rose through the ranks of Hyperion, a powerful weapons manufacturing corporation, starting as a programmer. He eventually became the president of Hyperion, gaining immense power and control through the use of outright violence, assassinating those who stood in his way. His relationship with his daughter, Angel, is complex and tragic. Angel was a siren with powerful abilities. At one point, a bandit captured Angel to sell her due to her abilities. Frightened, Angel took control of the bandit's turrets and turned them on him, killing the bandit as well as her own mother by accident. Jack imprisoned and exploited her powers to control technology and manipulate others. He justified this abuse as necessary for quote-unquote protecting her and maintaining Hyperion's dominance. He used her powers for his own ends, which ultimately led to her death. As he gained power, Jack's personality became increasingly warped. After assuming control of Hyperion, Jack adopted the persona of Handsome Jack. He established a tyrannical rule over Pandora, using Hyperion's resources to enforce his control. His actions are always justified by his own internal logic that he is saving Pandora. Jack's hunger for control led him to Pandora, where he sought the vault for its immense power. His desire to control the vault's power stems from a belief that he is destined to bring order to Pandora. The trials and tribulations of his early experiences, combined with his rise to power, forged a personality as volatile and unpredictable as Pandora itself. To truly understand him, we must now delve into the specific traits that form the complex tapestry of his character. Jack displays narcissistic traits, viewing himself as a hero and savior despite committing heinous acts. He demands admiration and validation from others. He also dismisses or punishes anyone who challenges his self-image. He's manipulative and an expert at twisting narratives to justify his actions. He uses charm, intimidation, and deceit to maintain control. He exploits others' emotions and vulnerabilities for personal gain. He's extremely sadistic, enjoying the suffering of others, often making jokes about violence. He seeks power through fear and domination. He rationalizes his brutality as necessary for the quote-unquote greater good. He's also paranoid, believing others are constantly plotting against him. He reacts with extreme aggression to perceived threats. He justifies preemptive attacks as self-defense. He has a grandiose sense of self, projecting an exaggerated sense of self-importance. He constructs an elaborate persona, Handsome Jack, to mask his insecurity. He surrounds himself with imagery that reinforces his superiority, like Hyperion's massive space station. He's severely emotionally detached, lacking genuine empathy for others. He views people as tools and obstacles. He suppresses guilt and regret through justification and denial. He also displays delusions, convincing himself that all his actions are morally justified. He views anyone opposing him as villains or quote-unquote bandits. He also constructs a narrative where he is the ultimate hero. He's very possessive, treating people, including his own daughter, Angel, as property. He believes he knows what's best for others, disregarding their autonomy. And finally, he uses control as a means of reinforcing his superiority. We've wrapped up our look at Handsome Jack's, shall we say, unique personality. Now, let's see what you all had to say in our poll. But first, we can't move forward without acknowledging and thanking our fantastic listeners.
Guys, you're all cool!
We would like to extend a huge thank you to our incredible community of Dark Disciples and everyone who occasionally tunes in. We also want to give a special shout out to Kimberly from Chico's Tex-Mex for sharing our podcast with her large Facebook follower base. Thank you so much for sharing. Finally, we want to acknowledge Rich Frazier for his outstanding work in creating the intro and outro for our podcast. It really gives the podcast a unique beginning and ending. Don't forget to tune in to his radio station, The Never Ending Radio Show, featuring timeless music and timeless principles. A link is provided in the episode description. Thank you so much, Rich. Now, let's get back to the show.
You know what? I'm sick of your crap.
Gather round, dark disciples. The deepening darkness has whispered and revealed the breakdown of our recent poll. PTSD reigns supreme, claiming the most votes. Narcissistic personality disorder and borderline personality disorder share the spotlight, coming in a close second. Antisocial personality disorder and other bring up the rear with the fewest votes. Your choices have set the stage for our exploration into the shadows of the human psyche. Thank you all for participating. Let us now delve into the evidence, followed by the final analysis. Before proceeding to the final psychological analysis, let's lay out the facts. The weight of evidence against Handsome Jack is substantial. We need to dissect this evidence, the concrete proof of Jack's crimes, to fully understand the psychological profile we're building. This is about following the trail of his actions. Handsome Jack was responsible for countless deaths, both directly and indirectly. He took control of Hyperion through the assassination of its former CEO, Harold Tacitus. He ordered the mass slaughter of civilians on Pandora, labeling them as quote-unquote bandits to justify his actions. Jack also has the player character aid in the murder of his grandmother and the bandits he sent to kill her in the quest To Grandmother's House We Go. He ordered the destruction of entire settlements and populations, including Firestone and New Haven. Jack used Hyperion's resources to commit widespread environmental devastation. Once again, he utilizes Hyperion's resources, such as mass surveillance, to establish a totalitarian rule over Pandora and to enforce his control. Jack used propaganda and violence to suppress any form of dissent and maintain his power. He exploits and treats the population of Pandora as less than human for his own gain. He also selfishly used Pandora's resources for his own gain. Jack enslaved his daughter Angel and abused her powers against her will. He subjected her to severe psychological and physical abuse under the guise of quote-unquote protecting her. This ultimately caused her death. The Hyperion employees are expendable resources under Jack's leadership. He targeted civilians and used excessive force, which was a violation of the basic principles of warfare. He regularly tortured prisoners and enemies for information or amusement. He also used psychological manipulation to break the spirits of both enemies and subordinates. He utilized propaganda to justify his warlike actions. Jack abused his position as Hyperion's president to amass power and wealth. He corrupted Hyperion, turning it into a tool of oppression. He sought to eliminate those he deemed undesirable through his use of the Vault and the Warrior, essentially attempting genocide. And finally, he desired to unleash the Warrior, an ancient Vault monster, to cement his dominance.
Oh, you are the worst.
This podcast is for entertainment and educational purposes only. While we use the DSM-5 as a framework to provide psychological analyses of fictional characters, the discussions are not intended to diagnose, treat, or provide professional mental health advice. The interpretations shared are based on hypothetical scenarios and creative exploration and should not be applied to actual individuals or situations. For mental health concerns or diagnoses, please consult a licensed professional. Listener discretion is advised.
I want that Vault Hunter dead!
Every act of cruelty, every calculated manipulation leaves a trace, a breadcrumb leading us deeper into the heart of Jack's darkness. The threads of violence and delusion reveal a disturbing pattern. It's time to descend into the depths of Jack's mind to unravel the psychological enigma that shaped his reign of terror. For our final analysis, we have 4 diagnoses: narcissistic personality disorder, antisocial personality disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, and last, borderline personality disorder. The essential feature of narcissistic personality disorder is a pervasive pattern of grandiosity, need for admiration, and lack of empathy that begins by early adulthood. Based on the evidence presented, Jack genuinely believes he is the savior of Pandora and that he alone deserves ultimate power. He thrives on external validation and admiration from others and portrays himself as Hyperion's heroic CEO. He completely disregards the suffering of others, viewing people as tools to serve his goals. He believes he is entitled to absolute power and control, disregarding the autonomy and rights of others. Jack manipulates and exploits others for his own gain, with interpersonal relationships being transactional. He frequently mocks and belittles those around him, viewing others as inferior or incompetent. Finally, Jack has a fragile self-esteem. His violence and instability after setbacks reveal an inability to cope with perceived humiliation. Next, the essential feature of antisocial personality disorder is a pervasive pattern of disregard for and violation of the rights of others that begins in childhood or early adolescence and continues into adulthood. The occurrence of antisocial behavior is not exclusively during the course of schizophrenia or bipolar. There is evidence of conduct disorder with onset before age 15. Schizophrenia and bipolar disorder are not applicable. Based on the evidence, Jack demonstrates a blatant lack of concern for the well-being of others, often using violence and coercion to achieve his goals. He is also a master manipulator, using charm and persuasion to get what he wants. He doesn't show guilt or remorse, instead rationalizing his behavior as necessary for the greater good. Jack often uses lethal force, such as torture and execution of dissenters, and taking pleasure in the suffering of others. He also exhibits moments of reckless decision-making, lack of foresight, and demonstrates an inability to control violent urges. He presents himself as charismatic, witty, and likable through humor and confidence. Jack rarely expresses genuine concern for others, lacking true empathy, and is callous even toward former allies. Conduct disorder is a repetitive and persistent pattern of behavior in which the basic rights of others or major age-appropriate societal norms or rules are violated, including aggression toward people and animals, destruction of property, deceitfulness or theft, and a serious violation of rules. Outside of the abuse that he experienced as a child by his grandmother, not much else is known about his behaviors as a child. Despite this, and based on the evidence presented, Handsome Jack meets many of the characteristics to qualify for antisocial personality disorder. The essential features of post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD, are exposure to actual or threatened death, serious injury, or intimate violence, presence of recurrent and intrusive symptoms associated with the traumatic event or events, persistent avoidance of stimuli associated with the traumatic event or events beginning after the traumatic event or events, negative alterations in cognitions and mood associated with the traumatic event or events beginning or worsening after the traumatic event or events, marked alterations in arousal and reactivity associated with the traumatic event or events, beginning or worsening after the traumatic event or events occurred. The duration of the disturbance is more than 1 month. The disturbance causes clinically significant distress or impairment in social, occupational, or other important areas of functioning. The disturbance is not attributable to the physiological effects of a substance or another medical condition. Jack's experiences with childhood abuse by his grandmother and later the accidental death of his wife at the hands of his daughter would be qualifying events for PTSD. Jack does not outwardly portray intrusion symptoms in the Borderlands games. He rather displays avoidant behavior with regard to vulnerability and painful memories. He also displays negative alterations in cognition and mood, seeing himself as a quote-unquote hero and others as quote-unquote bandits. Jack also displays marked alterations in arousal and reactivity to perceived threats, responding with disproportionate violence. He also exhibits paranoia and hypervigilance. Based on the evidence presented, Handsome Jack meets many of the characteristics to qualify for PTSD. Finally, the essential feature of borderline personality disorder is a pervasive pattern of instability of interpersonal relationships, self-image, and affects, and marked impulsivity that begins by early adulthood. His obsessive control over Angel, imprisoning her under the guise of protection, demonstrates both fear of abandonment and distorted perception of love. Jack exhibits a fractured sense of identity, believing that he is a hero despite his horrific acts. His relationships are often volatile and abusive, and rooted in dominance and control rather than genuine connection. Jack teeters between intense emotions such as explosions of rage, cruelty, and sarcasm. His impulsivity is often fueled by his belief in his own righteousness, further detaching him from accountability. He exhibits occasional signs of dissociation, particularly in moments of extreme stress, distancing himself from the consequences of his actions. Based on this information, it is likely that Jack is exhibiting the co-occurrence of disorders, narcissistic personality disorder, antisocial personality disorder, PTSD, and borderline personality disorder. The shadows recede and our exploration concludes. Thank you, my dark disciples, for lending your ears and minds to this character. I trust you'll be back when the darkness calls again. Until then, beware the shadows, and I'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to Dark Character Profiler with Fulcrum. Listen every other Tuesday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Podcasts. Humanity was not meant to live this way. Society is left to the mercy of murderers and cutthroats. Hear Paige Zaplin Dam's epic tale brought to life in an audiobook. For years, Slade had felt secure in the forest. I am from simple, humble beginnings. I was raised in the Ironwood by an Ogress, an Anaral. He saw immediately that she was beyond a healer's aid. Even a skilled witch could not help her recover from losing so much blood. Mother? Slade thought he wanted revenge. Instead, he got redemption. A kingdom of ash and steam. The Ogress's Son. A dystopian neo-Dark Age fantasy. Narrated by Rich Fraser. Now available on iTunes and Audible. I promise you I will find whoever did this and avenge you, Mother.